Imagine walking into a luxury truck dealership wearing old, dirty clothes and asking to buy 5 brand-new Mercedes trucks. Everyone laughs at you, judges you, and assumes you can't afford anything. But what if they were completely wrong? This is the unbelievable story of Samuel Carter, a man who looked like he had nothing, but was actually one of the most successful businessmen in America. The employees who mocked him had no idea they were about to lose a life-changing opportunity worth millions of dollars. So stay with us until the end to discover how one small mistake changed an entire company forever. Before we begin, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories. Let's get started. The grand opening of Lone Star Motors in Dallas, Texas, was the biggest automotive event the city had seen that year. Bright banners decorated the massive dealership, live music played near the entrance, and dozens of luxury commercial vehicles gleamed beneath the afternoon sun. Business owners, transportation executives, and trucking company representatives crowded the showroom, eager to explore the newest Mercedes-Benz trucks that had just arrived from the manufacturer. Salespeople moved from customer to customer with confident smiles, hoping to secure large contracts. The dealership was known for attracting wealthy buyers, and everyone expected another profitable day. Amid the crowd, a man named Samuel Carter quietly stepped through the front doors. His appearance immediately caught attention, though not in a positive way. His jacket was faded and worn, his boots were covered in dust, and his gray beard looked as though it hadn't been trimmed in weeks. To most people, he looked like someone who had wandered in by mistake. Several employees exchanged amused glances. One salesman whispered to another, and both chuckled. No one bothered greeting Samuel as they did the other customers. Yet Samuel seemed unaffected. He slowly walked around the showroom, studying every truck with remarkable attention. He examined the tires, inspected the interiors, and carefully read the specification sheets attached to each vehicle. After nearly 20 minutes, Samuel stopped in front of the dealership's most expensive Mercedes truck. He nodded thoughtfully before approaching a young salesman named Eric. "Excuse me," Samuel said politely. "I'd like to purchase 5 of these Mercedes trucks." Eric stared at him for a moment before laughing. Thinking it was a joke, he looked toward nearby co-workers. Several employees overheard the statement and joined the laughter. "5 trucks?" Eric asked with a grin. "Do you know how much one of these costs?" Samuel calmly replied, "Yes, I do." The laughter only grew louder. A floor manager walked over after hearing the commotion. Looking Samuel up and down, he smirked and said, "Sir, each one of these trucks costs more than most people make in a year. Maybe you'd have better luck at a used car lot." Nearby customers turned to watch. Some looked uncomfortable, while others simply observed the scene unfold. Samuel remained composed despite the humiliation. "Are you refusing to sell them to me?" he asked quietly. The manager shrugged. "We're just being realistic." For a few seconds, complete silence hung in the air. Samuel slowly nodded, reached into his pocket, and pulled out an old flip phone. Without saying another word, he walked toward the exit. The employees laughed again as the doors closed behind him. They believed they had just gotten rid of a troublesome visitor. Outside, Samuel made a single phone call. His voice remained calm and professional as he spoke for less than 2 minutes. Then he ended the call and drove away. Inside the dealership, nobody thought much about the encounter. They returned to their work, still joking about the ragged man who claimed he wanted to buy 5 Mercedes trucks. Exactly 1 hour later, everything changed. The dealership owner received an urgent phone call in his office. As he listened, the color drained from his face. The caller introduced himself as the CEO of Carter Freight Solutions, one of the largest transportation companies in the Southwest. The executive informed him that Samuel Carter, the company's founder and majority owner, had personally visited the dealership earlier that day and had been publicly mocked by staff members. The owner's hands began to shake. New Carter Freight Solutions was preparing to expand its fleet and spend millions of dollars on new trucks. Suddenly, the identity of the ragged man became clear. Samuel Carter wasn't a poor wanderer looking for attention. He was a multimillionaire businessman who had arrived ready to make one of the largest purchases in the dealership's history, and the employees who laughed at him had just made the biggest mistake of their careers. The morning after the incident, tension filled every office at Lone Star Motors. News of what had happened spread through the dealership faster than anyone expected. Employees who had laughed at Samuel Carter the previous day suddenly found themselves facing the consequences of their actions. The dealership owner, Richard Lawson, barely slept that night. He knew exactly who Samuel Carter was. Carter Freight Solutions operated hundreds of trucks across multiple states and was one of the fastest-growing transportation companies in America. Winning their business would have secured millions of dollars in future revenue. Instead, his staff had turned away the company's founder because of the way he looked. Early that morning, Richard gathered every employee in the showroom. The atmosphere was silent and uncomfortable. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Richard asked, staring directly at the manager and Eric. No one answered. "You didn't just insult a customer. You may have cost this company one of the biggest contracts we've ever had." The manager attempted to defend himself. "We honestly thought he was wasting our time." Richard slammed his hand against a desk. "That's exactly the problem. You judged him before you even knew who he was." A few hours later, Richard drove to the headquarters of Carter Freight Solutions. The building was enormous, with dozens of company vehicles parked outside and employees moving in and out of the offices. It was clear that Samuel Carter had built an impressive business empire. After checking in, Richard was escorted to a large conference room. When the doors opened, he immediately saw Samuel seated at the head of a long table. Several executives sat beside him reviewing documents. The contrast shocked Richard. The same man who had appeared poor and unnoticed at the dealership now commanded the respect of everyone in the room. Every executive listened carefully whenever he spoke. Samuel looked up calmly. "Mr. Lawson," he said. "Please, have a seat." Richard sat down and immediately began apologizing. "What happened at our dealership was unacceptable. I take full responsibility. I'd like the opportunity to make things right." Samuel listened without interrupting. Richard continued. "We'll offer special pricing on the 5 Mercedes trucks. We'll provide maintenance packages, priority service, anything you need." The room remained silent. Finally, Samuel folded his hands and looked directly at him. "Mr. Lawson, I didn't visit your dealership looking for discounts." Richard stopped talking. "I visited because I needed reliable trucks for my company. Instead of being treated like a customer, I was treated like a joke." Richard lowered his eyes. Samuel continued. "You know what's interesting? Not one employee asked who I was. Not one person asked about my business. They made their decision the moment they saw my clothes." Several executives nodded. Then, Samuel revealed something that made Richard's stomach drop. "The 5 trucks I mentioned were only the beginning." Richard slowly looked up. "Our company planned to replace and expand a large portion of our fleet. Over the next 3 years, we were prepared to purchase approximately 50 Mercedes trucks." The conference room became completely silent. Richard felt his heart sink. 50 trucks. The value of the contract was worth several $1,000,000. It would have been one of the largest agreements in the dealership's history. Samuel leaned forward. "Your dealership was actually our first choice." Those words hit harder than anything else. Richard realized that his company hadn't merely lost a sale, they had lost a business relationship that could have transformed their future. "We can still fix this," Richard said desperately. "Give us another chance." Samuel paused before responding. "I believe people show their true character when they think nobody important is watching." Richard had no answer. "If your employees treat strangers with disrespect, then I cannot trust them to represent my company. Business is built on trust, and trust begins with respect." The meeting ended shortly afterward. 1 week later, Carter Freight Solutions announced a major fleet agreement with a competing dealership in Houston. The rival company secured the multi-million-dollar contract and immediately became one of the region's leading commercial truck suppliers. Back at Lone Star Motors, serious changes followed. The floor manager was terminated, and several employees received disciplinary action. Extensive customer service training became mandatory for everyone. Eric kept his job, but the experience changed him forever. Years later, He would tell new salespeople the story of the ragged man who walked into the dealership asking for 5 Mercedes trucks. He reminded them that every customer deserved respect regardless of appearance. Because sometimes the person standing in old clothes isn't poor at all. Sometimes they're the opportunity of a lifetime, and by the time you realize it, it's already too late. Months passed after Carter Freight Solutions signed the massive fleet agreement with the competing dealership. What seemed like a single embarrassing incident at Lone Star Motors continued to create ripple effects throughout the trucking industry. The story spread from one business conference to another. Transportation executives discussed it during meetings, sales managers used it in training seminars, and business magazines even referenced it as an example of how customer service failures could destroy multi-million-dollar opportunities. For Samuel Carter, however, life continued as usual. He remained the same humble man he had always been. Despite his wealth, he still preferred simple clothes, drove older vehicles, and often visited businesses without announcing who he was. He believed a person's character was revealed by how they treated someone who appeared to have nothing to offer. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Samuel stopped at a small family-owned truck dealership outside Fort Worth, Texas. Unlike the luxury showroom at Lone Star Motors, this place was modest. The building was older, the parking lot was smaller, and there were only a handful of employees. Working that day, Samuel walked inside wearing the same worn jacket he had worn during his visit to Lone Star Motors. A young saleswoman named Maria noticed him immediately. "Good afternoon, sir," she said with a warm smile. "Welcome. Is there anything I can help you find today?" Samuel smiled politely. "I'm just looking around." "Take all the time you need," Maria replied. "If you have any questions, I'll be happy to help." Over the next hour, she answered every question professionally. She never pressured him, never judged him, and never treated him differently from any other customer. She simply focused on helping. When Samuel finally asked about purchasing several commercial trucks, Maria didn't laugh. Instead, she sat down with him and carefully discussed specifications, financing options, delivery schedules, and maintenance plans. At the end of the meeting, Samuel handed her a business card. The moment she read the name, her eyes widened. "Carter Freight Solutions?" she whispered. Samuel nodded. Maria suddenly realized she had spent the afternoon assisting one of the most successful transportation company owners in the region. A week later, her dealership received an order for 10 trucks. Several months afterward, that order expanded into a long-term partnership worth millions of dollars. The dealership owner was stunned. When he asked Samuel why he had chosen their company instead of larger competitors, Samuel gave a simple answer: "Because your employees treated me with respect before they knew who I was." The story eventually reached Eric at Lone Star Motors. By then, Eric had become one of the dealership's top-performing salespeople. The painful lesson he learned from Samuel Carter had permanently changed the way he worked. One day, Eric requested a meeting with Samuel. To his surprise, Samuel agreed. When they finally met, Eric sincerely apologized for his behavior during that unforgettable day. "I was young, arrogant, and focused on appearances," Eric admitted. "I judged you without knowing anything about you." Samuel listened quietly. "I've regretted it ever since." For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Samuel smiled. "The important thing isn't the mistake," he said. "It's what you learned from it." Eric nodded. "Trust me," he replied. "I learned more from that day than from any sales training course." Samuel stood and shook his hand. Then something good came from it after all. As the years passed, both men moved forward. Carter Freight Solutions continued expanding across the country, while Eric built a successful career based on honesty, professionalism, and respect. Yet, the lesson from that day never faded. People often spend their lives trying to impress those who appear powerful while ignoring those who seem ordinary, but true character is revealed when no reward is expected. The ragged man who wanted 5 Mercedes trucks never demanded special treatment. He never asked anyone to recognize his wealth. He simply expected the same respect every human being deserves. Those who laughed at him lost millions. Those who treated Him kindly gained opportunities beyond imagination, and that is why the biggest mistake wasn't refusing a sale. The biggest mistake was believing that a person's value could be measured by the clothes they wore, because respect costs nothing to give, but failing to give it can cost everything.